A lone man in a cap runs for his life down a dark city street. His pursuers hurl insults and a rock, shattering a nearby car window. The man stumbles and falls hard onto the cold pavement. His attackers close in, furious that he tried to fight back. The fallen man can only look up in sheer terror, as the two thugs scream down at him, ready to finish the job. But suddenly, a gloved hand seizes one of them by the collar. A new figure emerges from the shadows, asking who broke his mirror. He shows them a terrifying vision of what he'll do to them next. The bullies immediately turn tail and flee, leaving the man stunned. But his rescuer is no hero, grabbing the man and demanding payment for the mirror. He shoves the terrified guy onto the hood, who insists he has no money. The commotion draws the attention of a woman watching from a nearby doorway. She and a well-dressed companion step out, wondering if it's a fight. Her companion observes that the noise seems to have settled down, but the scarred driver is far from finished with the matter. The woman, however, watches the scene unfold with a curious smile. He gets an idea, forcing the man into his car and heading for a bootleg warehouse. He speeds through the streets, shouting that they'll get the money one way or another. The passenger can only tremble, realizing he was just saved by a monster. The driver suddenly barks an order, making his passenger jump in fear. He tosses him a handkerchief, telling him to wipe the blood from his face. The man looks on, confused by this small, unexpected act of care. As they head toward their destination, a new thought crosses his mind. Maybe this man, Gideon, is actually a decent person underneath it all. But Gideon immediately snaps, warning him not to get blood on the car seats. He explains that since alcohol is prohibited, there's a huge demand from those who still want it. For immigrants like him and his friends, it's a hard-won opportunity to finally make a living. The passenger quietly asks if he has friends he can truly rely on. Gideon's mood darkens as he mentions a best friend from his past, just as the car suddenly jolts. Gideon's face hardens as he reveals his friend died in the war. The passenger immediately realizes he's touched a raw nerve. The awkward silence is broken as Gideon slams on the brakes, clearly irritated. They've arrived at their destination, a large, nondescript warehouse. Gideon calls it their castle, leading the man inside to get the money from his crew. But as they step inside, a loud crash from above stops them in their tracks. The passenger cries out in confusion, wondering what just happened. Without hesitation, they both sprint toward the warehouse entrance. He calls out, asking if everyone inside is all right. But what he finds is a scene of utter chaos, as one of Gideon's men is struck down. Gideon's eyes widen in utter disbelief. He can only stare, trying to comprehend what he's seeing. Before them lies the brutal aftermath of the attack, and the monstrous creature responsible for it. In an instant, Gideon's shock turns to pure, unbridled fury. A guttural snarl escapes his lips as he locks onto the beast. Without a second thought, he charges headfirst into the fray. But the monster is impossibly fast, landing a devastating blow. The impact rips through him, drawing blood, and Gideon is sent flying across the warehouse floor. He hits the ground hard, his arm mangled from the impact. Gideon skids across the floor, utterly defeated in a single blow. But even now, he tries to rise, cursing himself for not running when he had the chance. The monster stands over its handiwork, a truly grotesque sight. And from the shadows, a new voice wonders what's happening. It's the woman from the street, who seems to have expected this outcome. Her companion suddenly appears by Gideon's side, sensing something faint within him. Gideon can only lie there, broken and bleeding on the cold floor. The man finds him intriguing, wondering if Gideon is simply accepting his own death. But he can also feel the raw fury and killing intent still burning inside him. The companion smiles, remarking that it would be a shame to let such a spirit go to waste. Gideon's consciousness drifts into a dark void, where a memory from his past appears. He remembers his friend, Eric, telling a young, crying Gideon not to be afraid, and promising that they would always be together. He realizes this is all just a dream. Meanwhile, the passenger runs frantically through the warehouse, calling out for help. He finds the rest of Gideon's crew, who are shaken and angry at his reckless entrance. One of them snaps that in a situation like this, there's no time to think. But another crew member looks over with a smirk, saying he knew he would come. The well-dressed man simply responds with a casual drag of his cigarette. The memory takes him back to the trenches, sitting beside his friend Eric. Even in the darkness of his mind, the pain of the past remains. He remembers Eric's words, a promise that they would always be together. A promise that was meant to last a lifetime. But that promise was shattered in a single, horrific moment on the battlefield. Now those words echo in the void, a haunting reminder of what he lost. Gideon suddenly gasps for air, his eyes snapping open in a daze. He clutches his head, trying to piece together what just happened. He looks down at his arm. the one that was torn apart by the monster, and finds it completely healed, as if the injury never even happened. His mind reels, unable to process what's happening. He touches his own face as if to confirm he's still real. He suddenly finds himself on a couch, completely disoriented. He wonders where he is, his last memory being the monster in the warehouse. Just then, the sound of footsteps approaches. A flamboyant figure bursts into the room with a cheerful greeting. Gideon scrambles up, demanding to know who this stranger is. The man introduces himself as Smith, addressing Gideon by name. Gideon is stunned, but Smith simply explains he saw his license. But before Gideon can react, Smith lunges forward and grabs him. Smith squeezes Gideon in a tight embrace, gushing about how thrilling it was to see him so desperate to live. He throws his arms wide, declaring that because of this, he decided it would be a waste to let Gideon die, and gave him a part of himself to save him. Gideon can only stare in disbelief as the woman from the street, Ukare, appears behind him. Smith smiles, acknowledging that a little explanation is probably in order. He claps his hands together, calling for his ensemble to appear. A troupe of performers suddenly bursts into the room, striking a dramatic pose. Gideon can only scream, completely overwhelmed by the bizarre turn of events. Smith begins his grand explanation, revealing that they are beings from another world who have slipped into this one. He explains that they feed on the energy created by amplifying human emotions. Smith reveals the monster was a human, parasitized by a creature called a Ukare. He wipes away a fake tear, remarking on how truly tragic the scene at the warehouse was. He explains that under the influence of these creatures, humans lose themselves to their emotions, and that his kind finds great joy in watching humans live out their raw, unfiltered lives. That's why Gideon was chosen, as only he can use this new power to defeat the Ukare. The entire troupe celebrates this announcement with a banner and a cheer. Smith then dismisses his angels, waving them off with a thank you. He clears his throat, pretending to have forgotten what they were just discussing. He gets close to Gideon, explaining that a simple conversation would be too dull for his wonderful entertainers. Getting back to the point, he tells Gideon that he must use the power he was given to eliminate the Ukare. Gideon struggles to repeat the word, trying to make sense of it all. Smith confirms it with a sharp, predatory smile. He reveals that he, too, is a being from that other world. The revelation sends a jolt of pure shock through Gideon, but Smith quickly clarifies that he's a little different from those creatures. As he speaks, a strange, dark energy begins to emanate from Gideon's arm. He stares in disbelief at his own body, which is no longer entirely his. Smith reminds him that he was the one who allowed this to happen. He leans in close, warning Gideon not to lose control of his emotions. Gideon looks down in horror, wondering if he's already turning into a monster himself. Smith admits he lacks the sense to just knock someone out himself. With a wide, fanged grin, he declares that all the preparations are now complete. He then tries to drag a frantic Gideon off to hunt down the culprit from the warehouse, but they suddenly find themselves on the stage of a lavish, crowded lounge. A voice calls out, chiding Gideon for his behavior. Smith warns him not to act up after he went to the trouble of bringing him here. But Gideon shouts back that Smith's chaotic methods are the very reason he's struggling. Nearby, two observers remark that it would be a shame to miss such an entertaining chat. Smith suddenly pauses, a new thought crossing his mind. He tunes into the swirling chaos of human thoughts and emotions filling the entire room. He picks up on a rumor about a nearby bootleg warehouse. His eyes narrow as he focuses on the lead. He sees a memory of men discussing the Rossi family's new warehouse in Little Italy. With a sudden burst of energy, Smith declares that they have their destination. Gideon can only stare, completely lost. They soon arrive at an unassuming building in the city. As Smith confidently leads the way, Gideon questions if he's sure about this. He can't bring himself to trust this strange, flamboyant character. But Smith explains he overheard a conversation about the Rossi family taking over a warehouse. And with a cry of excitement, he suddenly dashes toward the commotion. Gideon glares back, telling him to get on with it already. He confirms that this must be the warehouse they're looking for. The moment they step inside, the strong smell of alcohol fills the air. They find a man on the floor ranting about the evils of liquor spread by criminals. He screams that it's his mission to reclaim the country as an executor of justice. Smith excitedly declares bingo, realizing the man is a prohibition officer. A dark, predatory grin spreads across Gideon's face. Smith watches the scene unfold with absolute delight. The officer begins to transform, thorny vines erupting from his back. Gideon is stunned by the sudden and grotesque change, but the thorny vines suddenly lash out, wrapping around Gideon's arm. They dig into him with incredible speed, forcing him to his knees in agony. He realizes his own emotions are being amplified by the creature's presence. His rage and killing intent are spiraling out of control, threatening to consume him. His thoughts begin to blur as he struggles to understand what's happening. He can't comprehend why he's feeling this way. As a wave of pure, unadulterated fury washes over him, the transformed officer looks down on him with a twisted, monstrous grin. Gideon is completely ensnared, helpless on the floor at the creature's feet. His vision blurs as the creature's words echo in his mind. The monster condemns them as a stain on the city, an obstacle to true justice. It scoffs at their simple desire to earn money and live a decent life. It roars that such pathetic parasites don't deserve to dream. But as the rage boils over, the power within Gideon finally awakens. He lunges forward, his transformed arm lashing out like a thorny whip. The sharpened appendage rips clean through the creature's torso. And just like that, Gideon stands over the remains of his foe. But the transformation isn't finished, as a monstrous maw opens wide. His mind is now consumed by a single primal urge to kill. His monstrous form bites down hard on the creature's shoulder, tearing through its defenses with ease. A spray of dark fluid erupts from the devastating wound. The officer's monstrous form can only writhe in agony. But Gideon isn't finished, his thorny arm lashing out once more, morphing into a massive bladed weapon. He stands triumphant, a terrifying spectacle of pure, unrestrained power, and in the background, Smith celebrates the victory with open arms. He's absolutely thrilled, confirming that he made the right choice in picking Gideon. But he seems to have forgotten that Gideon is still completely lost to the rage. Smith rushes in for what he calls a victory hug, but Gideon's monstrous arm lashes out, impaling him through the chest. The attack sends a spray of dark fluid into the air, but Smith just laughs it off. He embraces the monstrous Gideon, trying to calm the beast down. With a sharp-toothed grin, he commands the power to recede. The monstrous scales on Gideon's arm begin to retract, leaving him dazed and confused as he returns to normal. He looks up just in time to see Smith casually spit out a stream of dark fluid. Gideon can only point in horror, realizing he just ran his new mentor through. But Smith just gives him a cheerful thumbs up, assuring him it'll heal in no time. Smith casually walks down the stairs, remarking that he was worried Gideon wouldn't snap out of it. He cheerfully adds that an uncontrollable weapon is completely useless, much to Gideon's annoyance. With a wave of his hand, he dismisses the thought, ready to move on to the next thing. He suddenly turns back, slapping Gideon's hand in a congratulatory high five for a job well done. But as their hands meet, Gideon can only stare, still shaken by the experience. He thinks back on the overwhelming power, realizing he may never be able to control it. He questions the source of that voice, that all-consuming rage that took him over. A fragmented memory flashes through his mind, a feeling that there's something he needs to remember. Smith snaps him out of it, telling Gideon he'll be counting on him from now on. He finishes with a smug, self-satisfied grin. But Gideon meets his gaze, declaring that he'll use this power for himself. Elsewhere, a young woman named Emily sits by a window, looking deeply concerned. And in another part of the city, a hand grips a stained knife, vowing to protect someone named Sharon. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoes from a nearby apartment building. Smith appears in the doorway, wondering what all the noise is about. Gideon stumbles out of the car, clearly in a hurry. He grits his teeth, demanding a reason for their reckless driving. Smith explains that after Gideon collapsed at the warehouse, he had to carry him. To get here, he took a rather destructive shortcut through the city, and he seems absolutely thrilled by the memory of wrecking the car. Gideon is furious that the car was a loaner, but Smith just offers to buy him a new one. He cheerfully suggests that if Gideon is so angry, he should take it out on one of his angels. But his expression suddenly changes as he notices something is wrong. A strange, dark energy suddenly erupts from Gideon's arm. He curses, struggling to contain the power now flaring up on its own. He knows he has to control his emotions, blaming Smith for this entire mess. But he has to admit that this is a serious problem, worrying what will happen if this power completely consumes him. Just then, their argument is interrupted by a police car pulling up beside them. Smith is instantly overjoyed, grabbing Gideon and shouting that a new case has just arrived. The officers can only stare in shock at the gruesome scene before them. One of them declares that this couldn't possibly be the work of a human. The gathered crowd begins to murmur, blaming the recent influx of immigrants for the violence. But perched on Gideon's shoulders, Smith finds the whole thing rather creative, suspecting a Ukare is involved. Gideon angrily throws him off, startling a young woman standing nearby. He looks on with a grim expression, frustrated that he was too late once again. He turns away from the woman, his face a mask of cold determination. The woman, however, seems incredibly nervous, clutching her hands together. Gideon approaches her, demanding to know what she saw. but she immediately turns and flees, forcing them to give chase. But Gideon trips in his haste, hitting the pavement as Smith calls for him to stop. The woman turns back, her fear replaced with concern as she asks if he's all right. He awkwardly picks himself up, clearly embarrassed by the clumsy fall. Gideon holds up his transformed hand, telling her to wait a moment. He then whirls on Smith, grabbing him and demanding to know if he's trying to make him lose control. But Smith calmly explains that they can't just ignore her, as she might have valuable information. Gideon's anger immediately deflates at the simple logic. Smith decides to leave them to it, warning Gideon not to transform and then blame him for it. With that, he turns and walks away, leaving Gideon to handle the situation alone. He glances back, casually mentioning his angels and leaving Gideon utterly confused. Gideon reluctantly offers to help the woman, seeing as she's clearly in trouble. Smith is, of course, absolutely thrilled by this development, but he quickly feigns disgust at the very thought of it. He dramatically agrees to stay by Gideon's side, much to our boy's annoyance. Smith then insists on a wardrobe change, proudly showing off his new suit. Gideon grabs him, trying to shut him up as Smith gushes about how exciting he is. The woman can only stand there, completely bewildered by their bizarre dynamic. She smiles warmly, innocently remarking that they must be good friends. The comment immediately strikes a nerve, causing Gideon to flinch. As she heads inside, he calls out her name, Emily. Gideon listens with a grim expression as Emily begins to tell her story. She explains that she and her friend Sharon worked together at a small cabaret. One of the customers started approaching her outside of work, acting friendly. He promised to always be there for her, and she began to feel safe around him. But one day, his kindness twisted into a possessive, monstrous obsession. Fearing for their lives, she and Sharon fled, seeking refuge in a nearby church. Inside, the man stumbled and fell, giving them a brief moment of hope. But he rose again, his movements becoming more erratic as Emily watched in terror. The reflection in her eye shows the monster raising a knife to strike her down. And when she came to her senses, all she could see was the bloodied knife in her hand. She recalls her friend's final moments, covered in the dark fluid of the attacker. Emily explains how the man's form began to twist and change into something monstrous. After that day, Sharon disappeared, and a string of similar incidents began to plague the city. Smith listens intently, concluding that her friend must have been parasitized by a Ukare. The strange word leaves Emily completely stunned and confused. Gideon can only repeat the term, trying to process this new information. Smith explains that these creatures possess humans, twisting their bodies into monstrous forms. Gideon awkwardly tries to explain that he's going through something similar himself. Emily worries she said something wrong, but he bluntly tells her not to mind him. Getting back on track, Gideon insists they need to find Sharon and asks what she was like. Emily begins to describe Sharon, calling her the one and only best friend she ever had. She was always bright and strong, the complete opposite of Emily, and always there to encourage her. A memory of them laughing together flashes through her mind. Emily admits that Sharon's strength was the only reason she was able to survive. But now, she can only blame herself for what's become of her friend. With renewed determination, she vows that this time she will be the one to save Sharon. Gideon cuts her off, asking for a physical description of her friend. Emily gets a bit too close, noting that Sharon's hair and height are actually quite similar to his. The phrase best friend echoes in Gideon's mind, a painful reminder of Eric. He quickly brushes the feeling aside, asking if she has any idea where Sharon might be. Emily admits with a heavy heart that she has no idea where to even start looking. She breaks down, completely overwhelmed by the hopelessness of her situation. Smith suggests they investigate places like the cabaret where she and Sharon worked. He decides they'll wait until nightfall to check the area around the club one more time. With a plan finally in motion, the trio heads out into the city. Gideon turns to Smith, questioning where his usual manic energy has suddenly gone. But Smith's demeanor has changed, admitting that for some reason he doesn't understand. He has a very bad feeling about getting too close to this Sharon. He then warns Gideon to keep his powers in check and to wear the proper attire for the job. As night falls, they arrive at their destination, the cabaret where it all began. They arrive at the cabaret, a place filled with dark corners and hidden passages. Gideon tells Emily that he and Smith will check the back and to call out if she finds anything, but he hesitates, thinking it might be better for her to just wait outside. After all, the Ukare isn't the only danger here. He's worried about what he himself might become. His dark thoughts are interrupted as a performer suddenly grabs his arm. She smiles, suggesting that if they're together, everything will probably be fine. But then she immediately runs off, declaring she'll go look somewhere else, leaving Gideon completely baffled by her strange behavior. Just then, another woman approaches from behind, calling him brother. She offers to get a drink with him, remarking that she's far more fun than the girl he's with. Gideon's expression remains cold, completely ignoring the woman's advances. But elsewhere in the club, a hand suddenly grabs Emily's arm. She looks up in shock, caught completely off guard by the stranger. The man and his friends try to pressure her into drinking with them. She tries to explain that she's with someone, hoping they'll leave her alone. But his companions just laugh, clearly enjoying her discomfort. Emily pleads with him to let her go, but he refuses to listen. Her rejection causes his friendly demeanor to instantly vanish, replaced by a sudden violent rage as he shoves her back. He grabs her again, determined to drag her away as she cries out in fear. Emily can only cry out, her face a mask of pure terror. But a memory flashes through her mind, a vow to protect Sharon at all costs. Gideon, meanwhile, is still dealing with the performer, wondering what her deal is. She tries to keep his attention, admitting she knew Sharon but dismissing it as unimportant. He presses on, asking if she's seen Emily, since the two were supposedly always together. But the woman scoffs, claiming she has no idea who he's talking about. Gideon's mind drifts, recalling that the person he's looking for was always alone. Just then, a loud crash echoes from across the room, startling them both. Gideon immediately shouts for everyone to get out of the club. He grabs the man who was harassing Emily, telling him to run for his life. The man he just pushed away is sent flying across the floor, his arm torn from his body. He looks down at his own hand, wondering why this is happening. Gideon grits his teeth, a familiar rage beginning to build inside him. The dark energy begins to erupt from his body once again. But the attacker wasn't him. It was Emily who stands over the fallen man, questioning why this always happens. Gideon can only stare, mistakenly calling out Sharon's name, but Smith quickly appears, correcting him that this isn't Sharon at all. Emily looks down, her expression unreadable. The fallen man can only curse her, wondering why she fought back. A memory reveals his true nature, as he once told Emily she should be grateful for his attention. A flashback reveals the truth of that day, as Sharon cried out for Emily to save her. But in that moment of terror, she fought back with brutal desperation. A reflection shows a second, darker presence lurking just beneath the surface. A new personality begins to take hold, one that vows to protect the fragile girl named Sharon. Smith is absolutely delighted, realizing he's witnessing a split personality. He explains that the Ukare parasitized Emily's mind, creating a new persona. Gideon whirls on him, his own power flaring as he demands to know if Smith sensed this. The rage boils over, threatening to take control once again. And in her mind, the protector stands over the weeping Emily, vowing to use her power to keep her safe. The dark power surges through Gideon's arm. As he tears at his own face, his body twisting into a monstrous form. His fist clenches, brimming with unrestrained fury. He lunges forward, completely consumed by the rage. A guttural roar escapes his lips, his humanity all but gone. But Smith calmly tells Emily that this won't do. He reminds her not to forget about them, a sly grin on his face. Suddenly, sharp spikes erupt from the ground, impaling Gideon's monstrous form. A massive fanged maw opens wide, revealing the true form of Emily's protector, now fully manifested. The two monstrous forms launch themselves at one another in a chaotic blur. The protector lets out a silent, terrifying roar, its jaw splitting wide. A blinding light builds from deep within its throat, ready to be unleashed. But Gideon's form is already upon it, weathering a flurry of brutal strikes. The protector's multiple arms raise sharpened poles, preparing a counterattack. They drive their weapons deep into Gideon's body, impaling him from all sides. The creature roars in triumph, but Gideon is far from finished. He musters his remaining strength, pulling back a massive armored fist. The spiked appendage smashes directly into the protector's face, and the devastating impact sends a shockwave through the creature's head. The blow shatters the protector's defenses, tearing it apart. It erupts in a final, blinding flash of light. The blast sends Emily flying back into a pile of rubble. She hits the ground hard, completely unconscious. And the cabaret is left in a state of utter ruin. Gideon's monstrous form stands triumphant amidst the wreckage, but once again Smith steps in to calm the raging beast. Gideon struggles against the power, his monstrous features slowly receding. He collapses to the floor, completely drained as he returns to normal. But his attention is immediately drawn to Emily, lying motionless on the ground. He rushes over to the unconscious Emily, calling out to her. He kneels beside her, his face etched with concern. Gideon panics, wondering what's happening to her body. Smith theorizes that the parasite was attached for too long, draining her life force along with it. As her consciousness fades, Emily weakly reaches out one last time, and with that, her life slips away into the void. Gideon can only look down at his hand, accepting the grim reality. A final memory surfaces as Emily realizes she was always alone. Her last thought is a quiet thank you to Gideon for trying to help. Believing that now, finally, all of her suffering is over, her final thought echoes in the silence, a whisper that everything is finally over. Gideon can only kneel over her lifeless body, another failure weighing heavily on him. His hand clenches into a tight fist, trembling with frustration. He grits his teeth, unable to accept this tragic end. Smith, however, simply watches with a detached, curious expression. He marvels at how humans can use the power of their emotions to create their own reality. He muses that even if her entire world was a fabrication,
he's left wondering what that unpleasant feeling she had was all about.
And as he ponders this, he notices a strange resemblance in the nature of her power. His eyes suddenly widen with a shocking realization. He turns away, shaking his head in utter denial. There's no way, he thinks, that person could possibly be in this world. He wonders if the diversity of human emotions is causing the Ukare to evolve. He's never before seen a power capable of warping space itself, but he quickly regains his composure. He decides that fighting is the only way to understand this new threat, and that this unpleasant feeling will surely vanish. After all, humans are the same, hating what they can't comprehend. Just then, his angels appear looking concerned. They ask why he's so down, especially after Gideon's successful debut on the stage of battle. Smith strikes a dramatic pose, feigning offense at their lack of faith in his new recruit. One of his angels decides to take matters into their own hands, suggesting they just ask Gideon what's wrong. After all, he's been spending the most time with Gideon lately, so he should be able to get some answers. But the effort of thinking seems to completely drain him, as he collapses onto a nearby table. He suddenly springs back to life, declaring that moping around is just too boring. She decides that just waiting around for something to happen isn't her style at all. The others watch as Gideon hoists her up, seemingly back in action. Their new destination is a large, imposing church in the middle of the city. Gideon seems confused as they step inside the holy building. The angel explains that the power Emily used was nothing short of a miracle, and that the Ukare they just encountered was a type she's never seen before. Gideon turns to her, asking if that's really the case. She explains that the very space around Emily warped when she transformed, a power that is completely new to her. She figures that investigating the church where Emily took refuge might reveal some clues. Gideon realizes with a jolt that she's talking about the very church they're standing in now. The angel's eyes light up with a manic glee, thrilled that her intuition was correct. She immediately dashes off, spotting a priest in the distance. The priest greets her, asking if there's anything he can help her with. She gets straight to the point, asking if he knows anything about a murder that happened here a month or two ago. The question sends a visible shock through the clergyman. The angel cheerfully notes that his reaction is all the confirmation she needs. The priest is visibly shaken, unable to hide his sudden fear. He quickly denies knowing anything and demands they leave the holy grounds. And with a loud slam, the heavy doors are shut in their faces. Gideon criticizes her blunt approach, but she just says it's the most efficient way. She waves it off, pointing out that there are plenty of other people to ask. In the courtyard, nuns are busy serving food to the city's poor. A predatory grin spreads across her face, sure that she'll hear plenty of fun stories. Gideon looks on, wondering how this chaotic being has survived this long. A deep sense of unease settles over him as he watches her. The angel continues her questioning, but Gideon's attention is suddenly drawn elsewhere. His eyes widen in utter disbelief at what he sees. Standing just a short distance away is a man in a pristine white suit. A man who looks exactly like his long-dead friend, Eric. The sight sends a jolt of pure shock through Gideon's entire body. He can only stare, frozen in place by the impossible vision before him. He tries to deny it, insisting that it has to be a mistake. But there's no doubt in his mind as he whispers his friend's name. He knows it can't be him because Eric died right in front of him. And just as quickly as he appeared, the figure turns and walks away. Without thinking, Gideon screams out his friend's name in desperation. He immediately breaks into a sprint, chasing the figure down the street. He follows him along the church grounds, his mind racing. But when he rounds the corner, the man is nowhere to be found. The impossible sight sends his mind reeling in confusion and pain. A horrific memory of Eric's death flashes before his eyes, a stark contrast to what he just saw. His sudden collapse draws the attention of a nearby nun. She approaches with a gentle expression, asking if he's all right. As he insists he's fine, she offers to get him some water and a place to rest. But Gideon can only grit his teeth, fighting against the overwhelming turmoil in his head. The nun asks if his wounds are hurting, telling him not to overexert himself. But Gideon dismisses her concern, explaining the scars are from the war years ago. The nun looks on with a knowing, sorrowful expression. She quietly disagrees with his assessment. He clutches his head, the phantom pain of his past returning. She explains that the wounds of the Great War never truly heal, even if they've closed over. Gideon looks up, suddenly asking if she was there too. The nun reveals she served as a military chaplain, witnessing the horrors firsthand. A memory of blood-soaked hands flashes through her mind, a reminder of the utter powerlessness she felt amidst the destruction. But, she continues, her voice filled with a quiet conviction, her purpose is to guide those who carry sorrow and pain and to offer them peace. Gideon can only listen, her words striking a chord deep within him, but his expression hardens as he mutters to himself that there's no way Eric could be here. He suddenly stands, startling the nun as he prepares to leave. Gideon thanks her for her kindness, insisting that he's fine now. And with a final, determined look, he walks away from the church. Elsewhere, the nun listens as another wounded man tells her his story. His words seem to trouble her deeply, bringing her to the verge of tears. But Gideon's resolve only tightens, his mind set on a new path. He walks away from the church, his expression now a mask of cold resolve. But the angel quickly catches up, calling out his name. She chides him for suddenly running off, but he just tells her to be quiet. She asks if he learned anything about Sharon, but he quietly admits he found nothing. However, she reveals that she managed to pick up an interesting lead of her own. She heard a rumor about a mass poisoning at a nearby factory that led to many disappearances, and was followed by a series of mysterious truck accidents in the area. She suggests they investigate, hoping it might lead them to a new Ukare. With the decision made, she immediately dashes off to start questioning people again. But her aggressive methods are clearly not working, as the priest and other men demand she leave. Gideon can only stare, still shaken by the impossible sight. But the angel declares there are other ways to get information, proudly holding up a newspaper. Following a new lead, they're pointed in the direction of a local business. The angel cheerfully questions a clerk, trying to piece together the recent events. Their investigation takes them to the back of the factory, where something seems out of place. She confirms that mass layoffs have occurred, wondering if the disgruntled workers are involved. But with too many potential suspects, Gideon grabs her, ready to move on. Just then, two men armed with clubs ambush them from behind. Gideon reacts in a flash, catching the weapon before it can connect. And with a furious roar, he demands to know who sent them. The angel calmly reads her notes as the situation escalates behind her. But the other man grabs her, holding a knife to her throat and demanding she stay quiet. Unfazed, she asks if they're connected to the recent string of accidents. She correctly guesses that they're the disgruntled workers who were laid off. The man insists that this has nothing to do with her. But Gideon has already taken care of the other goon with a single brutal kick. The fight is over in an instant. Gideon ties up the remaining attacker, accusing him of being sent by the factory manager. He demands to know if they're planning an attack on the factory itself. But the defeated man just smirks, remarking that it's a real shame. He reveals their plan is already underway at the factory. Inside, a group of disgruntled workers marches forward with purpose. Their leader declares that their time for patience is finally over. One of his companions, however, seems incredibly nervous about their plan, but the leader puts a hand on his shoulder, promising to handle things if it comes to it. He explains that he was given a miracle, and that attacking the factory is the only way forward. Meanwhile, Gideon and the angel arrive to find the rumors were true. The workers are stunned by their sudden appearance, with one of them admitting he messed up, but their leader just stares back with a cold, unwavering gaze. The angel's expression turns serious as she studies the man. Her eyes widen as she realizes with a jolt that it's him. She gets the same unsettling feeling from this man that she did from Emily's protector. Gideon's gaze remains fixed, his resolve hardening. The angel wonders if they should strike now, but worries Gideon might not be able to resist the creature's influence. The laid-off workers stand united behind their leader, ready for a fight. But Gideon knows he can't afford to be reckless right now. The leader recognizes him from the church, mocking him for interfering with their plans. Gideon tells him to ignore his companion, declaring that his only business is stopping whatever the workers have planned. The leader tells his men to stand back, insisting that this fight is his alone. But the angel holds Gideon back, warning him that the man is possessed by a monster. She tells him to strike now, before he's completely consumed by his own emotions. The leader lunges forward, throwing a powerful punch that Gideon barely manages to block. The impact sends a strange energy coursing through his body. He's forced to his knees as the leader questions what he just called him. The man scoffs at the idea that his righteous anger makes him a monster. He asks Gideon if he's ever lost his job just because of where he was born. A memory shows the factory manager callously dismissing the workers without pay. He recalls a life of being beaten down, dismissed, and having his dignity trampled, and all of that pent-up fury finally explodes to the surface. Gideon grits his teeth, the man's words hitting far too close to home. The leader tells his men to leave, insisting this has nothing to do with them anymore. But as he turns to walk away, the angel tries to get Gideon back on his feet. Gideon's hand clenches into a tight fist. He rises, grabbing the man and admitting he has no right to judge his anger. But he knows all too well what happens. When that kind of pain is used by something else, only to be discarded in the end, he roars that it's because of this weakness that he can't do anything to stop it. The leader can only stare back, completely baffled by this sudden outburst. So Gideon declares that they're all coming with him, much to everyone's shock. Meanwhile, the factory manager is led down a hallway by another man. He looks nervously through a window, cursing under his breath. Inside, he's confronted by his superiors, including the man who looks exactly like Eric. The man makes it clear that this is not a social visit. He reminds the manager that he was asked to improve the factory's performance, but instead, productivity has fallen while complaints have only increased. He coldly asks if it was a mistake to trust him with this responsibility. As the man turns to leave, the manager begs for just one more chance, but his plea is met with a foot crushing his hand on the floor. The man warns him that broken trust is not easily mended, and that his future in this city is now on the line. With a chilling smile, the man tells the manager to do his best not to die. Just then, the office door bursts open, revealing Gideon and the disgruntled workers. The manager can only stare in disbelief and rage at the intrusion. The original leader tells the manager he should know exactly why they've come. He presents their demands: unpaid wages, severance, and help finding new jobs. The other workers look on, confused about who's actually in charge now. But the manager explodes with fury, calling them criminals for making demands. The leader looks down, admitting he's fully aware of what he's done. He declares that he started this fight and he'll be the one to take full responsibility. But the manager shoves the paper back, screaming that he'll never give in to their demands. The worker leader lunges forward, demanding the manager sign the papers or else. But Gideon shoves him aside, grabbing the manager and screaming that he's not worth talking to. The other workers can only watch in shock at this sudden escalation. The terrified manager demands to know who this new guy is. With a wild look in his eyes, Gideon claims he's just a simple passerby, but he adds that since he's annoyed now, he's going to have to take it out on him. The angel cheerfully chimes in that the manager will be paying for his own hospital bills. Gideon gets terrifyingly close, asking if he knows what it feels like to have his head caved in. The workers are horrified, realizing he's a gangster and begging him to stop. The leader immediately gives in, pleading for someone to help and promising to sign anything. With a terrifying grin, Gideon tells him to sign before he breaks his fingers. And just like that, the manager's signature is on the page. The angel remarks that Gideon is a genuine monster, and the manager should be grateful. The workers celebrate their victory, deciding to disperse for the day. But the angel stops their leader, insisting he come with them for questioning. The man can only respond that this is going to be a problem. Just then, their exit is blocked by the man who looks just like Eric. He looks down on the terrified manager, calling him utterly incompetent. The manager addresses him as president, revealing his high rank. The workers can only stare in shock, recognizing the company president. The president remarks that after all this setup, it's a shame they're just going to accept the workers' terms. His expression twists with disgust, calling the whole situation pathetic. Gideon can only wonder what is wrong with this guy. The angel looks on in confusion, asking if this man is someone named Smith. The president then turns his attention back to the workers. He suddenly appears behind their leader, pressing a gun to his head as a present. He holds the man hostage, telling the others they're free to kill anyone they like. The president leans in close, asking the terrified man what's wrong. He whispers a final, cruel question. Does he want to die weak and powerless? The worker leader grabs the weapon, screaming at the president to stop messing around. But the president simply forces the man's own hand to pull the trigger. A single shot rings out, and the leader is struck down by his own gun. His companion can only scream in absolute horror. Gideon and the angel are completely stunned by the sudden, brutal act. The man's body falls lifelessly to the floor. The other workers can only stare, frozen in disbelief. But the president just laughs, congratulating the man for finally doing something. He declares that this is the signal for the real fight to begin, urging them all to struggle. He stands like a king on a stage, telling his audience to enjoy the show. He declares that this is just the opening act, a signal for them to struggle. With a theatrical flourish, he tells them to put on a good show for the audience. The remaining workers can only scream in fury at the man's cruelty. But Gideon just grits his teeth, the familiar rage beginning to build. He looks over at the man who wears his friend's face, whose expression remains utterly cold and detached. The brutal scene is reflected in the eyes of the other workers, as their collective despair and rage finally boil over. One of them is consumed by the power, vowing to kill them all. And with a final roar, he unleashes a devastating wave of energy. The blast rips through the office, catching the other workers in the chaos. One of them is immediately taken down, buried under the rubble. The factory manager can only cower in terror amidst the destruction. Another worker looks on in horror, calling out for his fallen leader. But the transformed man is consumed by his own power, his body torn apart in the blast. The president calmly steps through the carnage, completely unfazed. He theatrically imagines the headlines, blaming the immigrant workers for the massacre. A new, sharp-dressed figure appears, bowing respectfully to the president. He smiles, explaining how this tragedy will turn public opinion against them. The president's eyes narrow, a flicker of interest in his cold gaze. The angel asks the companion if his master has been granting these miracles to others. A memory flashes of Gideon's monstrous form clashing with Emily's protector. A brutal collision of two similar, terrifying powers. The protector's fanged maw roars in defiance, while Gideon's armored form stands its ground. But back in the present, the angel denies the horrifying implication of what she's seeing. The president's cold gaze offers no answers. He simply crushes the last of the manager's hope under his heel. The angel looks out at the carnage, realizing the president's presence feels disturbingly familiar. It's the same thorny, chaotic energy she's been hunting all along. The angel is completely frozen, her mind reeling from the shocking revelation. The president calmly acknowledges her, as a monstrous entity manifests behind her, asking if it's really him. The creature lets out a silent, furious roar. The angel looks down at her own hand, wondering why her power is reacting this way. She clutches her head in agony, realizing the one she's been hunting is standing right in front of her. A memory flashes through her mind of Gideon's monstrous form, clashing with the thorny power of Emily's protector. The sheer force of their battle had been utterly devastating. She remembers the raw, unrestrained power Gideon possessed, and the strange, familiar energy his opponent had unleashed. The memory shows Gideon's raw power as he tore through the cabaret, facing off against Emily's protector, a creature of similar might. Their clash unleashed a devastating wave of pure energy, sending debris flying in every direction, and shattering the very foundations of the building. Gideon's form was a whirlwind of destruction, his arms like spiked clubs. But his opponent was just as formidable, its body covered in sharp armor. A being born from the same thorny, chaotic power, the two monsters had collided in a brutal, unrestrained battle. And now, seeing the president, the angel understands the horrifying truth. His fist had clenched, brimming with a power he couldn't control, and he had smashed into his opponent with devastating force. Two beings of similar, terrifying energy locked in a brutal struggle. His spiked arm tore through the protector's defenses, shattering its monstrous form with a single decisive blow. The impact sent the creature flying clean through the cabaret wall. It crashed hard onto the street outside, leaving only a cloud of dust in its wake. Gideon had stood victorious over the remains of his foe. But even then, his own monstrous hand began to change once more, a creature wrapped in thorny vines, a spectacle of raw power. And the angel realizes the source of that power is the man standing before her now. The memory of its fanged maw flashes through her mind. She walks through the rubble of the factory, her mind reeling. Her eyes widen as the horrifying truth finally sinks in. She calls out Gideon's name, seeing his monstrous form in her mind's eye. The memory of his terrifying, rage-filled face is still fresh in her mind. But a new figure begins to manifest, covered in strange, swirling patterns. It's the president's companion, vowing to protect his master at all costs. He lunges forward, declaring that he won't let anyone get close. But his attack is cut short as a massive spike rips clean through his chest. The angel can only stare in shock at the sudden turn of events. The president's protector is taken down in a single devastating blow, and Gideon is the one who delivered it, now rising from the rubble. The force of his attack sends a shockwave blasting through the factory wall. He looks back, his face a mask of grim determination. The defeated creature can only writhe in agony amidst the wreckage. Its monstrous form begins to dissolve into nothing. The president calmly steps over the remains of his fallen guard. He and the angel then walk away from the carnage, leaving Gideon behind. The president calmly observes the monstrous power now directed at him, but the thorny energy begins to dissipate, leaving Gideon clutching his head. He cries out in agony as the transformation forcibly recedes. and collapses to the ground, completely overwhelmed and disoriented. But the president's gaze remains utterly cold and detached. He simply stands amidst the chaos, looking down on the scene. His face is a mask of indifference, as if this is all just a game. Gideon slowly pushes himself up, his eyes fixed on the man before him, and the impossible sight sends a fresh wave of shock through him. He can only ask why Eric is standing right there in front of him. The president simply stares back, his face devoid of any emotion. Gideon can only ask if his friend is somehow still alive. The impossible sight sends his mind into a complete tailspin. He clutches his head, unable to reconcile what he's seeing with what he knows. His thoughts begin to fracture under the immense strain. The horrific memories of the war and Eric's death come flooding back. And all that pain and confusion erupts in a single monstrous roar. The thorny power begins to manifest once more as the president and the angel look on. The angel kneels before the president, her own power reacting to his presence. And the last remaining worker can only stare, caught in the middle of this impossible conflict. The angel's monstrous form prepares to strike, its bladed arm aimed at the last worker. But she hesitates, holding back her attack at the last second. The president calmly tells her that there's no need to finish the job. She immediately retracts her weapon, agreeing to his command as the worker looks on in shock. He hears a voice in his head, wondering if he's truly being allowed to leave. Sometime later, the same worker stands in the church, thanking someone for their help. The nun from before offers him a final prayer before he departs. He looks back at her, completely confused by her words. She continues, explaining that this is because he is special. With a serene smile, she declares that a miracle is with him, and that he is the one who will save them all. But the nun's expression is one of deep sorrow, as a thorny power emanates from her arm. The worker can only stare back, completely stunned by her declaration. He confirms that he too was given a miracle. And from the shadows, the president watches, finding this new development intriguing. Elsewhere, another man is consumed by his own monstrous power. A new figure with strange markings suggests he might do a good job for them. But he's suddenly attacked, strange tendrils erupting from his body. The strange energy wraps around him, catching him completely off guard. The president watches the scene unfold with a cold, detached curiosity. The flamboyant man can only look back in shock, his body still ensnared. Smith roars in defiance, vowing that they won't take anything more from him. But his outburst is met with a powerful, destructive blast. The attack rips a massive crater in the floor, but the president and the angel are unharmed. The angel looks down, her expression somber and unreadable. As the president steps forward, a new companion tells her to wait. The man declares that he will be the one to give chase, but the angel's thoughts drift back to Gideon, remembering his pain at the church. The president, however, dismisses the idea of a pursuit for now. He simply states with cold certainty that their paths will cross again soon. And somewhere, two of Smith's angels can only watch the events unfold. The president remarks that with all this commotion, the police are sure to arrive soon. He turns his attention to the last remaining man, noting they don't have much time. His expression remains cold and calculating, completely unfazed by the carnage. The factory manager, however, is a trembling, terrified mess. He suddenly bursts into a manic laugh, claiming he was the one who took down the monster. He proudly declares that he killed the creature that attacked them. The angel, however, looks on with complete and utter boredom. The manager pleads with the president, asking if he's proven himself to be a trustworthy man. He nervously clutches the gun, ready to do whatever it takes. The president smiles, admitting he finds the man's pathetic nature quite amusing. He then coldly informs the manager of his final role, the victim of a tragic immigrant riot. Before the man can even process the words, a thorny power erupts from the ground. The president and his companions watch as the manager is completely consumed. And in a flash of dark energy, his part in the play comes to a brutal end. The angel can only offer a quiet sound of mild surprise. She looks on, wondering if the show is already over. The factory manager lies motionless, impaled by the very power he was meant to control. The angel turns to the president, disappointed that all their toys are now broken. The president stands silently amidst the carnage, his work here seemingly done. The angel muses that the seedbed her master was cultivating has now been harvested. Elsewhere, a young woman named Anna Marie looks on with concern. A gentle hand pats her on the head, offering comfort. A man in a doctor's coat assures her that he will prepare what's needed for their family. Her face lights up with pure joy at his promise. She then turns to a man in a strange harness, telling him it's time to go home. But the man suddenly convulses, his body racked with pain. Thorny appendages burst from his back as he begins to transform. The creature stands amidst the wreckage, its power fully unleashed. but two observers simply watch as Anna Marie complains about the mess. And just as quickly, the creature is reduced to a pile of rubble. A voice promises to return everything to its proper form. The nun stands before the president, her world seemingly warping around them. She quietly agrees to his will, pledging that they will do whatever their savior desires. She clasps her hands together with a serene, devoted smile, promising to bring about an age of control, violence, and war, all of it meant to sow division and chaos, for the sake of a new kingdom that will be born from the ashes. But Gideon suddenly jolts awake, screaming out Eric's name, as one of Smith's angels rushes in, relieved to see he's finally conscious. She complains that their owner Smith isn't telling them anything. But Gideon is completely lost, muttering Eric's name in a daze. He wonders how he could have possibly forgotten something so important. His mind is suddenly pulled back to the St. Nicholas Children's Home. A memory surfaces of him peeking down a long, empty hallway. He remembers hiding away in the dormitory, trying to be alone. A young Gideon sits by himself, consumed by a deep and lonely sadness. But his solitude is shattered by a young Eric, bursting in with a call to adventure. The boy points forward with a wide grin, declaring that he's found Treasure Island. The sudden intrusion startles the young Gideon, pulling him from his sorrow. Eric approaches the new arrival, Gideon, and introduces himself with a friendly smile. But Gideon immediately tells him to stay away, much to Eric's surprise. After a moment's thought, Eric decides on a much more direct approach. He dramatically throws himself forward, trying to get the boy's attention. He gets a closer look and realizes that Gideon has been crying. But Gideon refuses to say a word, turning away from the other boy. Instead, he suddenly bolts, telling Eric to just leave him alone. But Eric immediately gives chase, determined not to let him go. The two boys race down the hallway, with Eric shouting that he's only chasing because Gideon ran away. Gideon thinks to himself that Eric is only the third fastest kid here, and there's no way he'll be caught. But his confidence is short-lived as he stops to catch his breath. He looks back, wondering if he's finally shaken the other boy off his trail. But Eric suddenly tackles him from behind with a triumphant cry. He pins the younger boy to the ground, telling him it's useless to run. Gideon can only struggle, completely outmatched and frustrated. Eric helps him up, apologizing and asking why he was crying before. But Gideon just sits down, hugging his knees and refusing to answer. His face crumples as he tries to hold back his tears. Eric asks if he feels unwanted, as Gideon mutters that everyone thinks he's useless. A painful memory surfaces of his father abandoning him for that very reason. He sobs that the person who brought him here had the same look in their eyes as his father. But Eric just smiles, cheerfully remarking that they're exactly the same. The comment leaves Gideon completely stunned. With a wide grin, Eric reveals that he was abandoned too. He recalls a home filled with anger, where his mother was always upset and his father always drunk. One day he woke up and they were both gone, leaving him to be found by one of the sisters. The story seems to resonate with the young Gideon, who listens quietly. Eric looks back at him with a gentle, understanding smile. He points out the other kids playing outside, like Emma and Maggie, and even Eddie, who's always got his nose stuck in a book. He explains that even the older kids, like Roy, feel the exact same way. He insists that everyone here knows what it's like to want to cry, and that no one thinks he's useless. And so he tells the young Gideon to stop crying. He makes a solemn promise that he will never abandon him, and that they will always be together. The words leave Gideon completely stunned and speechless, and for the first time, a small, tearful smile breaks through his sadness. With that, Eric brings him into the fold, introducing him to the other children. The two quickly became inseparable, getting into all sorts of trouble together. As the years passed, their bond only grew stronger, until the day the war came calling. Gideon remembers thanking Eric, a decision that would change both of their lives forever. The memory takes him back to the trenches, where one soldier is frozen in fear. But he and Eric charge over the top, heading straight into the fight. Eric remarks that he never thought they'd end up in a place like this together. The two friends stand side by side, ready for whatever comes next. Eric reminds him of their promise to always stick together. He then jokes that if things get too hairy, he'll just leave Gideon behind. But their banter is cut short, as a nearby explosion throws Gideon off balance. Eric grabs him, steadying his friend amidst the chaos. He screams at Gideon to get back on his feet. The world dissolves into ringing ears and the deafening sound of his own heartbeat. Eric screams for him to hold on, promising they'll get the money they deserve when the war is over. And when that day finally comes, Gideon can only look on, his face a mask of grim determination. But his expression suddenly changes as he looks up, muttering about the sky. Eric turns, completely confused by his friend's sudden alarm, and they can only watch as the very sky above them begins to crack like glass. A horrifying, multi-eyed creature begins to pour through the fractures in reality. It lashes out with impossible speed, sending a soldier flying through the air. The monstrous entity descends upon the battlefield in a storm of dark energy, and the soldiers are thrown aside like dolls in the face of its overwhelming power. A fallen soldier's hand reaches out from the dirt and mud. Gideon can only stare in disbelief, wondering what he's even looking at. The horrifying, multi-eyed creature continues its rampage across the battlefield. He realizes with dawning horror that a monster is devouring another monster. Eric screams his name, trying to snap him out of his terrified trance. Dark tendrils of energy lash out across the war-torn ground. Gideon can only scream his friend's name as he's caught in the blast. The world dissolves into a blur of pure, destructive chaos. His eyes can only reflect the utter horror of the moment, and the memory of the sky shattering is burned into his mind forever. He gets a horrifying glimpse of the creature's true form. Eric can only scream, his face a mask of pure terror. The other soldiers are frozen in shock, unable to comprehend the scene. He shouts out, trying to make sense of the impossible, but he realizes the creature is speaking, its words echoing in his mind. His expression hardens as he tries to understand its message. He watches in horror as one of his comrades is lifted into the air like a toy. The creature reveals its full, monstrous form, asking if they can understand it. It grabs another soldier, testing its newfound power on the helpless man. And with a casual flick, it ends the man's life in an instant. The creature holds up a soldier, remarking on how soft and fragile they are. It looks on with its many eyes, calling such a state a complete waste. It decides to test out a new power on the helpless man. Strange, veiny tendrils begin to erupt from the soldier's body. Gideon and Eric can only watch as the strange appendages rise into the air. Their faces are frozen in a state of pure, uncomprehending shock. The creature's form shifts into a blur of spikes and eyes, and in an instant, the soldier is completely obliterated. The monster examines its own hand, seemingly testing its newfound power. It looks down at the soldier's dissolving remains, dismissing him as useless. The other soldiers can only stare, wondering how any of this is possible. The creature's many eyes lock onto them, its focus absolute. It explains that it has been observing and absorbing them for a very long time. It has learned of the human emotion to harm, destroy, and dominate others. An emotion it has studied for a long, long time. It declares that this feeling is constantly born, grows, and now fills its very being. It asks if this is what it means to be human, and if this is the form they should all take. The monster declares that this is, in fact, the form they are meant to have. It reveals it tried to gain power to achieve this goal, but was driven away, and that it was simply bad timing that the gate opened when it did. It explains that while it failed to kill them, their presence allowed it to gain a new power. It asks them to listen closely to its words and to live wisely. A strange offer from a creature that doesn't wish to kill them. Gideon rushes to his friend's side, asking if he's all right. But Eric just grits his teeth, muttering that he has to do what he was told. Another soldier holds his weapon, terrified of becoming like the monstrous remains on the ground. The creature finds it amusing that they're afraid to use a knife, despite risking their lives in battle. It thanks them, explaining that their fear has made things much clearer. It declares that it will have some of them manage the others, as it creates new samples. The remaining soldiers can only huddle in despair, wondering how their world came to this. One of the men breaks down, realizing they're all going to die here. But a new voice cuts through the silence, belonging to a man from the opposing side. He looks over their meager supplies, noting how little they have left. He calmly pulls a pair of glasses from his coat, startling the few remaining soldiers with his sudden appearance. He asks if they can understand him, making a strange proposal. He warns that if they keep fighting, they'll all be wiped out, and that they must cooperate to survive. But the soldiers immediately refuse, telling him to get lost. One of them accuses the man of trying to steal their supplies, but another man tries to reason with them, insisting that cooperation is their only option. But one of the soldiers argues that fighting each other here is pointless, and will only get them all killed. The other men can only look on, their spirits completely broken by the impossible situation. The man with the glasses holds up a locket, explaining that he has a reason to live. He reveals a picture of his family, a promise he has to keep. He then asks the other soldiers if they don't have people they need to return to as well. His words strike a chord as the men realize they all have something to fight for. Eric looks over with a newfound resolve, agreeing that they can't die in a place like this. With a new plan, they decide to move before the creature can finish whatever it's doing. Eric puts a hand on Gideon's shoulder, offering his support, and for the first time the soldiers stand united, vowing to escape this hell together. The men can only look on, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. They stand united before the swirling chaos of the creature's power. The monster seems pleased, remarking that they're still alive. Eric looks over at their new leader, a silent question in his eyes. But the man steps forward, begging the creature to hear his request. He explains that their supplies are low and they can't afford to lose anyone else. The monster considers this, but reveals it wants to explore further and can't just let them go. The battlefield is now a clash of monstrous, otherworldly forms. But the creature simply dismisses his plea, telling him there's no need for that. It explains that their emotions will only grow stronger in this extreme state, and that the real show has yet to begin. The creature notes that it can see a new emotion within them, one that wasn't there before. The man with the locket can only look on, his face a mask of terror and resolve. The monster identifies it as elation, expectation, even hope, and it decides that this new development is not at all to its liking. It looms over the united soldiers, wondering what to do with this unexpected turn. But the fragile unity begins to crack under the immense pressure. One of the soldiers suddenly points, accusing their new leader of betrayal. He claims the man was only pretending to find an escape route to deceive them all. But before the argument can escalate, a dark appendage strikes the man down. The creature looks over his dissolving remains, remarking that such an act is not allowed. The creature reminds them of its command to live wisely. It then declares that the man who tried to inspire hope has failed. The leader can only lie there, his spirit completely shattered. And with that, a new wave of dark energy rips through the remaining men. One of them is caught in the blast, his body twisting into a monstrous new form. The others can only scream in horror at the grotesque sight. The creature continues its experiment, molding them like clay. It remarks that while it can now move, this new form is still useless. Its many eyes then turn to the last few survivors. It thanks them for their contribution, pleased by the data they've provided. The creature remarks that it will have to create new samples now. It explains that while their numbers are dwindling, it needs the remaining few to manage the others. And just like that, a new hierarchy is born from the ashes of the old one. Some of the men embrace their new roles with a terrifying, manic glee. They become the new wardens of this battlefield prison. The remaining soldiers can only cower in despair, their spirits completely broken. The strong now rule over the weak in this twisted new world. A brutal new order is established amidst the mud and blood. One of the men weakly begs for a drink of water, but he's immediately shoved aside, told that it's not his turn yet. The man bows before one of the new wardens, pleading for just a little water. The warden looks down on him with pure annoyance. But then his expression seems to shift, as if an idea has crossed his mind. He smirks, making a cruel offer to help quench the man's thirst. But the desperate soldier lunges forward, landing a solid punch and telling him to drink that instead. The warden is completely stunned by this sudden act of defiance. Another guard tells him to stop wasting his energy, but the fight is already over. The defiant soldier collapses to the ground, completely spent from the effort. The warden looks down, questioning the man's futile resistance. He strikes the fallen man, who can only scream that he's had enough of this hell. The warden can only curse, stunned by the sudden act of defiance. But the desperate soldier has found a weapon, his hands trembling. He points it at the warden, who taunts him that this will only speed up his transformation. But the soldier's face is a mask of grim resolve. He knows what he has to do to escape this fate. He mutters that he will not become a monster. And with a final desperate act, he turns the weapon on himself. A single shot shatters the silence of the battlefield. Gideon can only stare, completely frozen by the sight. The man's body falls lifelessly to the ground, another soul lost to this impossible war. The warden can only laugh at the man's final, desperate act. He furiously kicks the lifeless body, screaming that he won't be messed with. He rants that he'll make sure no one else gets to die so easily on his watch. But Eric screams at him to stop, his patience finally snapping. The warden whirls around, telling Eric to stay out of his business. He grabs Eric by the throat as Gideon shouts his friend's name in horror. The man's body lies still, a grim reminder of their hopeless situation. Gideon confronts the warden, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. But the man just gives him a twisted, manic smile. His eyes are wide with a terrifying, broken glee. Gideon grits his teeth, insisting that he's done nothing wrong. But his defiance only draws the attention of the multi-eyed creature. Eric can only scream his friend's name in horror. Gideon struggles on the ground, telling the warden to let him go. The creature explains that its own fluid has now mixed with his blood, and a dark, thorny power erupts from his body. The monster asks how it feels, noting that he's getting better at controlling it. Its many eyes watch with a detached scientific curiosity. But Gideon realizes with dawning horror that he's become another one of its samples, and his body goes limp, completely overwhelmed by the monstrous power. Eric can only scream his friend's name in horror. but Gideon is struck down in a single brutal blow. Eric rushes to his side, pleading with him not to die. He desperately promises to get help, his voice cracking with emotion. But his grief quickly turns to a defiant, terrified glare. The creature senses a new cocktail of emotions from him: fear, arrogance, and the joy of harming others. Its many eyes lock onto Eric, wondering how he will transform. Eric can only look up in terror, questioning why he's been chosen. He breaks down completely, screaming that he did everything it asked and that he's supposed to be special. And in a final, horrific act, he brings his hand down on his fallen friend. Gideon cries out, the pain of his friend's betrayal echoing through his mind. The memory shifts to a quieter moment, with Eric standing watch over the desolate trench. His eyes are heavy with exhaustion and a deep-seated weariness. He wakes Gideon, telling him it's time to switch places for guard duty. Eric warns him not to mess up like the last guy, or he'll be the one to take the blame. But Gideon retorts that Eric is the one more likely to get turned into a monster. He tells his friend to make sure he's the one who doesn't screw up. With the argument settled, Eric leans back against the sandbags, his watch now over. The two friends lie on the cold ground, utterly drained by the constant stress. But even in their exhaustion, they sit together, watching over one another in the hellscape of war. A lone figure steps through the mud and blood of the battlefield. It's Eric who stands over his fallen friend. Gideon can only look up, his body broken and his spirit shattered. But instead of another blow, Eric pulls him into a tight embrace, whispering an apology. Gideon remembers the day Eric showed him the recruitment papers, promising they'd make their fortune. But the reality of war was a brutal lesson in survival, where every step was a desperate fight. Eric kneels over his friend, realizing how naive he'd been about death and survival. And Gideon blames himself for dragging his friend into this hell. A memory of his younger self surfaces, pleading for help. But Eric's thoughts are a tangled mess, questioning if he ever truly needed Gideon at all. He admits that all he ever wanted was to be needed, and with a tearful smile, he confesses he just didn't want to be thrown away again. Gideon can only lie there, weakly calling out his friend's name. He whispers a final apology for everything that's happened. But Eric makes a solemn vow that he will never let Gideon die. The memory shifts again, as Gideon sits up, completely disoriented. He looks around the desolate trench, wondering where Eric has gone. Just then, the sound of footsteps approaches from the mud. He sees two of the monstrous creatures, now lifeless husks on the rocks, and the memory fades back to him lying broken on the battlefield floor. A single drop of sweat falls as Gideon's consciousness returns. He finds himself holding a distraught Eric, who weakly calls out his name. The memory shifts again, with Gideon now carrying his wounded friend through the trenches. He sets Eric down for a moment, asking what he was trying to do back there. Gideon knows they can't just wait around to die, but has no idea how they'll ever escape. But Eric tries to lift his spirits, having scavenged some food and a weapon for them. Their brief moment of hope, however, draws the unwanted attention of the creature. The two friends realize with dawning horror that they've been found. Without a second thought, Gideon hoists Eric up and makes a desperate run for it. But an unseen force slams into him, sending him crashing to the ground. The impact sends Gideon sprawling, the precious food scattered in the mud. The creature looms over them, declaring that its sample is almost complete. Eric scrambles to his feet, screaming for Gideon to get up and run. But a dark, shadowy attack lashes out from the creature's direction. Eric grabs his friend, trying to drag him out of the path of destruction. But the attack is too fast, impaling Eric as he tries to shield Gideon. He can only reach out, calling his friend's name one last time. Gideon is thrown to the ground, his body shrouded in darkness. He pushes himself up, weakly calling out for his fallen friend, and his eyes widen in pure horror at the sight before him. Eric's body is brutally impaled by the creature's dark attack. The monster holds his lifeless form, realizing it may have made a mistake. It seems the creature simply got carried away in the heat of the moment. Gideon can only crawl through the mud, reaching out in utter despair. But with his last breath, Eric weakly tells his friend to run. The finality of it all shatters Gideon's world, and he lets out a scream of pure agony. He cries out that it's useless, that there's nothing he can do to save him. Eric looks down, remarking that he hasn't seen Gideon cry like this since they were kids. A memory flashes of their first promise, that they would always be together. And with his final words, Eric tells his friend not to cry, his promise echoing one last time. Gideon can only weep, his world completely shattered by the loss. But Eric's final, blood-soaked smile commands him to live on. The weight of it all sends him collapsing to the ground, screaming his friend's name. The other soldiers can only wonder if he's just another casualty of the war. One of them rushes to his side, trying to see if he's all right. But Gideon is lost in denial, muttering that it can't be true. As the others try to pull him away, he continues to scream for Eric. He reaches out, pleading to go back, insisting his friend is still there. They struggle to restrain him as he thrashes, completely lost to his grief. His mind is consumed by a single, agonizing thought. Eric died protecting him. His mind screams that it's all his fault, over and over again. He's haunted by the crushing belief that he was the one who killed Eric, and the weight of that guilt is an agony he can no longer bear. But the simple, brutal truth remains. Eric died in the war. The angel realizes his all-consuming rage isn't just about what was done to him. He was furious at his own weakness, at his powerlessness to change anything. But as he stands, a new clarity begins to form in his mind. He declares that he's done running, and that he will get Eric back. He turns to the angel for answers about Smith, but she just shrugs it off. She shouts with a manic grin that she has no idea what's going on. He declares that he's done having things taken from him. The angel turns with a smirk, asking if he saw the monsters on the battlefield. She reveals with a sharp-toothed grin that she was one of them, and that she was the one being devoured by that creature. The revelation stuns Gideon as she asks if he can possibly understand. She recalls the feeling of her very existence being torn apart, her ego melting away into nothing. She explains that when she saw the president at the factory, she realized there was no other presence inside that monster. It was him all along. She scoffs at his vow to get his friend back, screaming that Eric is already dead, and that everything he's doing is completely pointless. Gideon screams back that even if that's true, even if Eric is truly gone, he refuses to let that monster take anything more from him. The angel simply looks on, her expression unreadable. Just then, another of Smith's angels appears, wondering what's happening with Gideon and their owner. But the first angel simply turns and walks away from them. She calls him a fool for not being able to win against the one who took everything. Gideon is stunned, realizing with a jolt that this angel is actually Smith. Smith's eyes gleam with a manic intensity, a terrifying sight to behold. And a strange dark power suddenly erupts from Gideon's body. The force of the blast sends Gideon flying out of the room. The other angel can only call out for her owner in shock, her cry echoing through the empty halls. Elsewhere, a group of well-dressed men stand at attention. They follow the president, who walks ahead with an air of authority. One of them watches with a silent, calculating gaze. He takes a confident step forward, asking his robed companion if he's allowed to act on his own. The robed man explains that the boy with the braids and the melancholic man could be the source of their problems. Smith, meanwhile, seethes with rage, declaring they must be eliminated at once. The robed man explains to his companion that this is his top priority. His companion asks if he's really trying to stop him. He maintains a cold, unwavering gaze. But a new flamboyant figure appears, telling him to do as he pleases. He flashes a fanged grin, declaring he's happy as long as he gets a good show. The sharp-dressed man can only listen in silence. The flamboyant man then turns his attention to the robed figure walking away. Now wearing a smiling mask, he remarks on how cold the other man is. The robed man continues on his way, walking down a quiet city street. Nearby, the boy with the braids watches, disappointed that someone ran away after all the trouble they went through. The boy with the braids wonders why he can't seem to find his target. He's suddenly startled by a presence he didn't notice before. He turns and apologizes to a well-dressed man for being distracted. The man looks down at him with a cold, calculating expression. The angel explains he has a bad feeling and is in a hurry, sensing a Ukare nearby. The man watches him go, taking note of the boy with the long braids. But he suddenly grabs the angel, asking if he's the one their founder is searching for. The question leaves the angel completely stunned and confused. Just then, another figure steps in to intervene. It's another of Smith's angels, who shoves the man back and calls out for his owner. The blonde angel calls out, relieved to have finally found his companion. He rushes to the braided angel's side, asking if they're all right and telling them to hurry back. But his companion looks up in sudden tearful shock. Before them stands the well-dressed man, whom the blonde angel recognizes as Simon. The braided angel asks if he knows this person, but his friend is sweating nervously. He can't seem to find the words, completely frozen in fear. He quietly identifies the man as his husband. Simon dons a smiling mask, asking his sissy what he's doing here after he's been searching for so long. He approaches them, asking if the braided angel is a new acquaintance. With a cruel smirk, he wonders if this new person has been deceiving his husband. The blonde angel nervously insists this is exactly what their founder warned them about. Simon leans in close, accusing the braided angel of being an evil that defiles the world. He then invites them both to come along and meet their founder. The blonde angel instinctively moves to protect his companion, But Simon's expression twists into a cruel, knowing grin. He calls his husband useless, unable to even make a simple decision on his own. He promises to re-educate him when they get home, to make him a more suitable partner. His face contorts with rage as he commands his terrified husband to come to him. The blonde angel can only tremble, completely frozen in fear. He's utterly paralyzed by the man's menacing presence. But the braided angel grabs his friend's hand, refusing to let him be taken. The blonde angel finds his voice, telling Simon that he will not go with him. Simon's masked expression remains unchanged, a chilling, silent threat. The scene shifts to a memory as rain begins to fall on the street. A flashback reveals the blonde angel's past, a life of forced and absolute submission. He remembers the pain and the tears, a constant state of suffering under Simon's control. He was constantly told that he was completely and utterly worthless. But even then, he found a small spark of hope in the image of a free-spirited dancer. It was a reminder of the strength he once fought so hard to find, and of a time when he was free to be himself, full of confidence and joy. He remembers a life spent hurting himself just to endure the pain, a time when he believed he couldn't go on for another second. He had reached his absolute breaking point, with nowhere left to turn. But then, a cheerful figure appeared in the rain, offering a way out. It was the braided angel, who brought a spark of light into his dark world. He remembers the day he was finally offered a hand in friendship. The memory brings fresh tears to his eyes, but this time they're different. He finally found a place where he could exist by his own will. And that memory gives him the strength to finally stand up for himself. The braided angel explains that their home is a place of freedom, not a cage. The blonde angel tearfully explains that even when things go wrong, they can still care for one another. It's a place where they can laugh, cry, and get angry together. With newfound resolve, he declares that their home has a heart. It's a precious place, he says, filled with people who are precious to him. And because of that, he tells Simon that he will never go back. The declaration causes Simon's cold demeanor to crack for just a moment. He scoffs at the idea of being abandoned for such a person. But he changes his tune, mockingly agreeing to see this precious place for himself. The braided angel steps forward, declaring they don't need his approval for their way of life. And that final act of defiance sends Simon into a silent, terrifying rage. Simon's rage finally boils over, questioning who they think they are. The blonde angel grits his teeth, finding the strength to agree. The braided angel shouts back, placing the blame squarely on Simon. And with a furious roar, Simon lunges forward to strike them both down. The braided angel can only stare in shock at the sudden violence. He sends the blonde angel sprawling to the ground with a vicious kick. But Simon suddenly stops, his expression turning to one of pure confusion. A new figure has stepped in, pulling the blonde angel out of harm's way. He glares back at Simon, questioning if he was really trying to protect that kid. The defiance sends Simon over the edge, as a strange power erupts from his body. Simon brings his foot down, ready to crush the defiant angel. The braided angel realizes they have to abandon everything to survive this. A voice echoes in their mind, telling them to keep running. But a monstrous power erupts from the braided angel's body, a power born from the will to throw everything away. They catch Simon's foot, shielding their friend from the blow. The braided angel grits their teeth, struggling against the immense force. They question their own actions, wondering why they're risking it all to help. A massive skeletal maw opens wide, a terrifying display of power. The blonde angel can only look up in absolute tearful shock. The monstrous form lashes out with incredible force, sending Simon flying. The blonde angel can only watch in shock, bloodied and bruised on the pavement. The creature's body is a grotesque mess of bone and thorny appendages. It stands over the fallen Simon, a terrifying protector born from desperation. But the braided angel screams, completely lost and unable to understand this power. Their monstrous arm smashes into Simon with unrestrained fury. They cry out in agony, having no idea how to even fight back. The blonde angel rushes in, grabbing his friend and asking what happened to Gideon. He holds on tight, terrified by the monstrous transformation taking place. The creature's maw opens wide, asking what it should do now. The blow sends Simon flying back with devastating force, smashing him into the pavement with a bone-shattering impact. The creature stands over its defeated foe, its power completely out of control. But the transformation is unstable, its monstrous form already beginning to dissolve. The power recedes, leaving the braided angel dazed and confused. He can only lie there, muttering in frustration at his own weakness. He looks down at his hands, realizing he's experienced a feeling he never wanted to know. A feeling of utter powerlessness in the face of this new reality. Just then, a figure is sent flying from a nearby rooftop. and the monstrous angel dives back into the fray, ready to fight once more. But Gideon's own monstrous form erupts, his face a mask of pure rage. His clawed hand digs deep into the flesh of his opponent. The blonde angel looks on in shock as a strange power begins to consume him as well. Gideon's monstrous form unleashes a devastating attack on the fallen Simon. The blow connects with bone-shattering force. He stands over his defeated foe, the power already beginning to recede. He rushes over to the fallen angel, calling out to him. The blonde angel can only lie there, weakly muttering Gideon's name. Gideon looks down, his own transformation fading as concern takes over. But a voice calls his name as Simon rises, seemingly unharmed by the attack. Gideon looks over with concern, asking if the blonde angel is all right. The angel quietly confirms that he is, though his body is still trembling. Gideon then asks if he was the one who fought back against Simon. The angel admits with a pained expression that it didn't go well at all. Just then, the rest of Smith's troop arrives, calling out to their owner and the fallen angel. The three newcomers can only stare in shock at the scene before them. They explain that they came running as soon as they heard Smith had left. One of them rushes to the blonde angel's side, trying to offer some comfort. Another asks Gideon if Smith is okay, but Gideon just insists that he's fine. The angel continues to cradle his friend, who is still completely dazed from the ordeal. The blonde angel lies motionless on the cold cobblestone street. Another of the angels looks on in fury, realizing what must have happened to her friends. The two remaining members of the troop can only stare with grim expressions. A voice calls for them to stop as they all take in the aftermath of the fight. Gideon tells them to get the injured to a hospital while he handles the police. The female angel gently cradles her fallen friend's head. The braided angel agrees to the plan, and the group prepares to leave. As they carry the blonde angel away, the woman offers Gideon a quiet thank you. The braided angel waves, telling them to hurry back when they're finished. But he suddenly turns to Gideon, asking about his own transformation. Gideon admits that he's learned to deal with his rage, but that he still struggles to keep it from running wild. He agrees with the angel, admitting that on his own he might not be able to do anything. But the angel insists that he can't just give up now. He quietly agrees with his own determined thought. He says that now he finally understands what it means to fight. He's tired of being so afraid that he can't do anything to protect what he loves. He thinks back on the family he's found with the others. As Gideon listens, understanding the feeling all too well, and for the first time he offers a genuine, knowing smile. Gideon puts a hand on the angel's shoulder, suggesting they'll do this together. The angel looks up, a new resolve hardening his expression. Gideon grabs his hand, a silent promise passing between them. And for the first time, the angel offers a genuine smile in return. With a firm clasp, their new partnership is officially sealed. Their investigation soon leads them to a new location. Standing over the defeated Simon, the angel explains that their founder sent him, and they need to find out where he is. But he knows that as they are now, they can't hope to win against the president and his followers. He insists they need to gather as much information as they can to stand a chance. But a chilling voice suddenly declares that all of their efforts are completely useless. A new figure appears, telling them that they are about to meet their end. He's flanked by two companions, declaring that they will all die right here, and that he will be the one to send them to their graves. His cold, confident gaze leaves no room for doubt.